Hey, dear colleagues. My name is Melvin Verghese. I'm a licensed psychologist living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the founder and host of Selling the Couch, which is a podcast and a blog which teaches us to grow our impact and our income beyond the therapy room. So, I actually started my podcast back in 2015, and it was honestly one of the most scary things that I have ever done. I actually never even imagined ever starting a podcast. I struggled a lot with like things like my own voice and feeling like I didn't have like that radio voice and and just a range of different things. And in this just video, I wanted to share with you 5 things that I wish someone had told me about starting a podcast. The STC podcast, just through some amazing colleagues and definitely hard work, has been quite successful. We're actually about to hit 1.2 million overall downloads, and the podcast is currently heard in about 125 countries all around the world, which is pretty amazing and super humbling because this is literally something that I record from a home office. And so, with that being said, the very first tip that I wanted to give you was 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 don't get stuck on gear envy. This is actually something that I struggled a lot with when I first started my podcast. There were existing podcasts out there, and then when I would go on like different forums and things like that, people kept saying, you need this specific microphone in order to start a podcast. And then, I would do a quick Google search or do a quick search on Amazon, and I would be like, oh my gosh, this is like $500 microphone. When I started my podcast, we had actually just moved into our first home and we had a ton of renovation costs. And so it was just not in the budget for me to spend that kind of money on a microphone. And that's something that I would honestly encourage you as well, regardless of whether you have the budget or not. I would highly recommend just starting with a cheaper and an inexpensive mic. In terms of quality, like sound quality and things like that, that will get you to, I would say, like a level 7 out of 10. And then over time, as your podcast starts to make money, and as you also maybe realize, like, hey, I really love podcasting and I enjoy doing this, then you can definitely think about, upgrading your gear. I would recommend at least waiting a year or 100 episodes, closer to 2 years perhaps, before you even consider kind of upgrading gear. So the mic that I would recommend is the Samsung Q2U. It's around $70 on Amazon, and the really nice thing with that mic is it's what's called a USB and XLR mic. So basically, you can just plug in a USB cable, and it comes with that cable, and then just plug in the other end of it into your computer, and then you can just record your podcast that way. And then it also comes with an XLR output. So XLR is kind of like just kind of ups the level of your audio quality. You need some additional gear for the XLR, so that's a good upgrade for down the line. But because you have that mic, then you don't necessarily need to get a new mic, and you can just sort of upgrade at a later date. So the mic that I honestly used for 5 years of the podcast was so it was the Audio Technica ATR 2100. I would not recommend that one because they did an upgrade to that one and they doubled the price of it, and so that's why I recommended the Samsung Q2U. I but I think that mic, the Samsung Q2U and the ATR are very good quality mics. So uh, and and then once your podcast, once you start to monetize your podcast and start to think about some of those things, and I'll give you some more tips on that in a later bit, in here in a little bit about how to monetize, then you can upgrade to some nicer gear. So like, from 2021 on, I use this mic, which is the Shure SM7B. This is the mic that's used by a lot of musicians. It was most famous by Michael Jackson, who recorded Thriller on this mic. And this is a really popular podcasting mic, and it's a fantastic mic as well. And that's the one that I currently use. But when you're first getting started, you don't need anything like that. Just get started and keep the cost low. The second tip that I could give you is there are some hidden recurring costs when it comes to podcasting. They're not huge. Like the one that's kind of the the one that every podcaster has is for podcast hosting. So podcast hosting, the best way to explain it is that's basically where our podcasts live online, and it's a really good idea to have a podcast host because those hosts help to distribute your podcast to those various directories. So like Apple Podcasts and Google Play Music and Amazon and Spotify and all of these different directories. If you have a podcast host, it's like a central repository, and then it'll distribute your each when you release each episode into those directories. It's much smarter to do that than individually upload because that honestly takes forever. And so they're not huge costs. So what I would do is I would kind of lean away from, the free sort of payment for a couple of reasons. One is generally when things are free, there's always this question of like, if something, I heard it like, if something is free, then you often wonder like, how are they making money? And then the second thing is if something's free, it usually means that you're the customer. And it's just kind of a strange or, just uncomfortable, I guess, model in my eyes. But podcast hosting does not have to be expensive. Libsyn's a really good one. Buzzsprout is a really good one. We were with Libsyn for around 5 years, and then we switched to Captivate, which is a little bit more expensive. It starts around $17 a month, and then they have like a $47 a month tier. We're currently on the $47 a month tier, but when we were first starting out, we totally would have been on the $17 a month tier. And the reason we switched to Captivate is it includes like a website as well. So we have the main STC blog, but we have a podcast section, and that section is actually Captivate's website. And the really nice thing is once you upload it into Captivate, it auto populates onto that website. So it just makes things a lot more streamlined for us. If you go to sellingthecouch.com/captivate, there's a free trial there where you can just check it out. So that's the second tip. The third tip that I would share with you is you don't know how your podcast is going to evolve. So don't worry about getting it perfect right at the onset. Truth be told, this is something that I struggle a lot with. As I shared at the beginning, I struggled a lot with my voice. I really didn't feel like I had like a podcasting voice. And and then I remember when I recorded the very first episode, the intro episode for STC, I recorded that thing like 4 or 5 times. And the reason I did it was because I just felt like I'm saying too many ums and ahs. I sound really dumb and all of those different things. And what I would encourage you to do is don't don't worry about getting it perfect at the onset. Just worry about getting it out there. Sort of the art of podcasting is the more you do it, right? As with most things like therapy, right? The more you see clients and all of those things, right? We become better as clinicians, and podcasting is the same way. So the more you do it, the better you become. And even now, I notice that I don't say as many of those filler words, the ums, the ahs, and all of those different things. And honestly, it's, I think, just the result of now at this point having done like 278 of these episodes. So, and then the other thing just related to that about the evolution of a podcast, there's just certain data things that you will not know until you release several episodes of your podcast. So, for example, what topics tend to resonate with your listeners? What things will be popular? If you do like a solo episode that is like a test of like a potential product or a service that you want to offer, you can get some data on that. So there's just some neat stuff that you will learn later. And so I would just more than anything just encourage you to keep publishing episodes so that you get better as a podcaster and then you get more data points as well. The fourth point I wanted to share with you is to line up your podcast with products and services. A lot of our colleagues ask me, Mel, like, how did you monetize your podcast? Because I know you have sponsors and you have affiliate income, you've got courses and all this stuff. And what I often say is, listen, when I first started, I didn't have like any of those kind of things. And basically, all I did was just some like one on one consulting. So, what I would encourage you to do is take out a sheet of paper and list every product and service that you offer. So, for most of us, it may just be like one on one therapy. And so, you want to specifically like highlight various niches that you serve, all of those things. Now, if you have things like an online course, list that out as well. If you do like paid speaking or you have a book, anything that's like something that can potentially generate revenue for you, make a list of those things. And then what you want to do is over time, you want to start to line up topics for your podcast episodes with those products and services. So, for example, with selling the couch, my newest course is called Online Course School. So it's basically a live cohort for therapists that want to create an online course. I know that a lot of us want to do that, and I just thought maybe doing it in the live format where I can teach a little bit, where we can have community and accountability would be kind of the best way to do that, because rather than just like a traditional digital course, because that kind of sits in our digital bookshelf and never actually gets consumed. And so when I was trying to think about online course school, one of the things I often do is what I basically do is I do three, if one month has 4 weeks, right? 3 of those weeks I'll do like an interview based episode, but that fourth week tends to be a solo episode. And that solo episode tends to be an episode that's lined up with a product or service. So for online course school, I might teach a specific aspect of launching an online course, right? The 5 pieces of gear that's the most helpful when launching an online course. And then at the end, I usually have a call to action, either to like a download. I have an A to Z online course guide, which you can check out at sellingthecouch.com/online course guide. But I have a guide, or I invite them to just outright become a part of the live cohort. And so so start to do that. And the neat thing with podcasting is because it's evergreen, right? So that these episodes don't just disappear, like, for example, like an Instagram post or a Facebook post or Twitter, when you tweet something, right? Like it gets buried underneath. With podcasting, what's really cool is most people listening to podcasts, they don't just listen to the first episode, but they actually go through the backlog and check out other episodes as well. And because of that, these episodes sort of live on, and you can then have almost like um, recurring traffic coming to products and services. And then the last tip that I can sort of share with you is use your podcast as a way to build out your network. Now, if you are at the point where you're looking to like fill a practice, or you're like, man, I really just want to sort of cement my referrals, then start by doing a combination of solo episodes where you speak about a certain niche, and more specifically about a certain struggle that someone in your niche is having. For example, let's say the niche is you work with YouTubers, right? YouTubers, generally online creators, tend to have a lot of fear, anxiety, depression, a lot of internal struggles, a lot of trauma, things like that. And so let's say your niche is YouTubers, and let's say you then can create let's say one of your spaces is you actually work with YouTubers who have social anxiety. And so, one of the things that you can do for your podcast episode is something like 5 things to help navigate social anxiety as a YouTuber, right? And so, you would share your knowledge and your expertise, and then you would have a call to action for your services with you. The other thing I would do is with as I shared, I do some interview based episodes, and I would sort of be strategic with those. So start by interviewing local referral sources, right? And as long as they line up with what you want for your podcast, I think there's just something so magical versus, you know, asking someone, inviting someone to come on your podcast, giving them the platform to share what they're passionate about, right? Just truly coming from a place of wanting to help and give. I just think that's something that's just so much more powerful than like sending like a generic letter to a physician's office or to a colleague or something like that. And then as you start to build out, let's say that you are now at that point in your career where you're like, hey, I don't want to keep doing one-on-one work. I want to build out things like courses. I'd love to do paid speaking. I'd love to speak at conferences and stuff like that. So let's say the example is like course, you want to build a course on a specific niche, right? What I would do is like find folks on LinkedIn, Twitter who are in those niches, connect with them there and invite them on your podcast and build relationships with them because they will be like your biggest allies down the line. And then you can then start to really, have uh, they become your allies, and then you actually feel like you're in that space and you're creating those things and all of those different things. And let's say same thing, if you want to speak at a conference, what I might do, same thing, get on LinkedIn or Twitter and connect with the folks that are associated with that conference, invite them on the podcast with simply just a goal of sharing maybe like a behind the scenes of creating the conference, something that would be valuable to them, but also valuable to your audience. That's the sweet spot that I found. And so, and just, I think coming from that perspective where you can genuinely help, want to help them, I think it just gives such a different level of relationship and a level of connection with that person. So, just in summary, the 5 tips I would share are: don't get stuck with gear envy. Second one is there are some recurring costs to podcasting, and the main one is podcast hosting. Second one is an editor, and I actually had forgotten to mention that, but I highly recommend hiring out an editor when you start your podcast. Now, practically what this means is I actually don't think everyone should be starting a podcast. I think all of us as clinicians, we have the potential to start a podcast because it's something that caters to our strength, the ability to ask questions, the ability to dive in deeply into topics, the ability to nerd out on stuff, right? But I would recommend only starting a podcast when you have a successful business. You're sort of clear on your niche. That way, you can like hire out podcast editing. You can hire out, you can get a podcast hosting service that's like really good quality. Then you don't have to worry. Like you're not then like, oh my gosh, if you get a cancellation or no show, you're not scrambling and being like, oh, I wish I hadn't started this podcast. And then you do something with in the podcasting space, which is called pod fading. And so I don't want you to pod fade. So um, as I wrap up, oh yeah, and then the third thing is you won't know how your podcast will evolve, so don't worry about getting it perfect at the onset. The fourth thing is line up your podcast with products and services. And then the fifth thing is use your podcast as a way to build out your network, both your local referral network as well as connecting with others who are all over the world that may be related to spaces that you want to go in and products that you want to create. So if you found our little conversation helpful, I actually have a free podcasting workshop that I put together. Contains a lot of the lessons and wisdom I've learned over these past 6 years plus. I've also just been very fortunate to play a small role in over 260 of our colleagues, their podcasts getting off the ground. Some really well-known podcasts in the mental health space, including a small role definitely in the Therapy Reimagined podcast as well. And yeah, I would love to support you with that. You can go to sellingthecouch.com/podcasting workshop. If you would like to sign up, we actually have it set up so that you can pretty much sign up for any date and a time that works for you. and it's 90 minutes, and it's full of just helpful information. I genuinely try to make it really helpful. And then, if you're sort of ready to take that next stage in the podcasting journey, I actually have a course and a community specifically for therapists who are launching and growing podcasts. So, us therapreneurs who are using podcasting maybe to grow our practices, but also to diversify our income beyond the therapy room. If that sounds like something you might be interested in, you can check out sellingthecouch.com/join the healthcasters. And when you check out, be sure to enter the promo code therapy reimagined. And there's a little bit of a discount code there off the advertised price. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. I truly hope that this was helpful for you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.